Good morning, people. Um, I had a request to do a little video on, um, why I wax my cheese, or why I bandage it, or natural rind it, or a question about whether or not it should be vapor bagged. So I brought you down to the cave in the cave. This is my basement, and these are my cheese caves. And so in each one of these, you probably can't see them all. For instance, um, I have some natural rind here. Got some waxing. I've got a bandage here, and these are just soaking in bags of wine for later on. And then some of these other ones here, I've got some blue cheeses and such. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about each one of the processes. Okay. First off, I'm just going to grab Old Bay cheddar. So I'm going to use this as an example. So for people that bag their cheese, the first thing you need to know is that this bag is for storage. Okay. So when my cheeses are aged, or any cheese is aged, it goes into storage. Storage being a vapor lock bag or a vacuum sealed bag like this one. A lot of people ask about aging cheeses in this bag. You should not. You can, but you really should not. And I'll tell you the reasons why. This is a storage bag, okay? Vacuum sealed bags made for cheese making and cheese processing for aging are specially designed, inherently more expensive, permeable plastic bags. What that means is you place your cheese in here and it allows the air to interface with the cheese. It actually allows the cheese to be sealed, but it also allows egress of oxygen and ingress of oxygen to allow the cheese to continue to age. Unless you're using those bags, you should never put a cheese in this bag, because two things happen. You cut off the air supply to the cheese, and the cheese stops aging. A lot of people say it does age. It will, to an extent, until it's completely robbed of the oxygen that is still inside of this cheese, and then it will stop. And then the third part of this is you will never receive the type of flavor that you deserve from a cheese that you spend so much time making. So, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, to spend hours making a cheese, or days, to put it into a bag to get flavor that's at best, it's just not worth it. Okay, so then comes the other types of aging. Just pop this bag in here, and we'll start at the bottom. This is a manchego. Beautiful. It's going to be a natural rind cheese. This cheese was both brined, and it was also dry salted. You can do one or both, or you can do them both. The reason for brining a natural rind cheese and dry salting a cheese is that you want to create a barrier on the top of the cheese that wards off mold development, while still allowing for the cheese to age. So basically what we're doing here is when we soak this in a brine solution or dry salt, and a brine solution contains usually about 2 to 3 pounds of salt per gallon of water, with a tablespoon of calcium chloride, and then a quarter cup of vinegar probably. And you will sit this in this brine for approximately, it could be 5 hours, it could be an entire day. It's based on the type of cheese. It's also based on the weight of the cheese, and how long it's supposed to soak per pound. With this cheese, it was brined, but sometimes the cheese may still be too moist for some reason. You didn't dry the curd out enough, whatever it may be. And in that case, with this one in particular, I dry salted a little bit, which is basically you sprinkle dry salt on the top, or put it on a surface and then roll the sides in it, whatever it may be. And the idea here is that you want this whole outer piece here to kind of crust and let the mold develop on the crust. As the mold develops, you can either brush it off. You can use, like I use this toothbrush here for some of my cheeses. Or a couple other things you can do is you can leave it to dry and then just wait till it turns to a dust and dry it off. Or with this type of cheese and some other cheeses, they actually say you should probably rub it in. So you would take a towel and you actually rub the mold down into here. If you don't like the idea of having the mold on your cheese, which is fine, but that's where a lot of your flavor is going to come from, you can do what's called a daily brine wipe. And basically what that does is once you see mold forming on the cheese, you get yourself like a quarter cup of water, tablespoon of salt, mix it together, and use a cloth and basically rub the mold off of the cheese. Okay, so that's the purpose of the dry salting and the brine, and how it affects the brine and how you use it to age your cheese. You also have to note, by the way, it's the cheapest. It's the cheapest. More expensive and a little bit more time consuming would be the wax. I have I forget what this is, Cotswold. It's Cotswold here. That I brush waxed. As you can see how ugly it is. I brush waxed this on the 5th. All right, so with wax, again, this is probably, this is going to be a good way, but it's going to be more expensive. So a pound of this wax will do probably 3 cheeses in and of itself, maybe give or take 2 to 3. But the problem with that is when you're out of wax, you got to buy more wax, unless you go through the process of, which I do, and it's a painful process, is removing the wax from your old cheeses, washing them down with a brush, any kind of a brush, not this one, but like a hand brush, with soap and water, drying it, bleaching it, rinsing it off again, and then using it again, which you totally can do. The issue though is that you want to be careful with is if you ever had any of your cheeses take on a defect, which with wax they tend to do when you're handling them. The wax gets too hard, your environment gets too dry, whatever it may be. When you're flipping these things, eventually you might get a crack. Just might be the smallest crack in the world here. And the problem with that is before you realize it, you may have mold growing up underneath of here. And unless you pay special attention to your cheese, you probably won't see it until it gets quite a way through the cheese. And that's not a terrible thing. You'll typically see underneath it here, if you look closely, I don't have one to show you, but you'll see like these black circles start to grow underneath. And, if you look at it, you'll know something's not right. And it's not a total loss. All you have to do is, again, a painful process. And you have to do this with wax because you don't want to trap the mold inside of there with all of that liquid, because that will definitely present an environment where your cheese can go south. So the minute you notice wax, you want to cut this off completely. And in my opinion, if it's got mold under it, you just want to chuck it. Because if you take this and you wax another cheese with it, mold is very resilient. It lives inside of that mold. Even if it's being cooked, it can still live in there. And it can then find itself wrapped around your new cheese. It wakes up and it starts growing all over again. So that's one of the problems I have with the cheese wax itself. But as far as aging, it's probably, second in the middle of how you want to age. So number 1 would be the natural rind. This would probably be the third type of aging that I would prefer as far as taste goes. This one here, the wax, you have the natural barrier, and it's also permeable. So it allows the cheese to dissipate moisture and oxygen via the wax itself, because the wax is permeable, and also allows oxygen to enter the cheese. So it creates a nice stable environment to the cheese to continue aging. If you cut off the moisture from leaving, cut off the oxygen from leaving, cut off the any of that process from reciprocating, the coming and going of the oxygen and the moisture into the cheese, you're going to have all kinds of issues with the aging. Usually with a wax or any cheese that, which I didn't mention with the plastic, I mean the vac bag also is that if you get too much wax in here, you can actually stop the aging. Too much wax, sorry. If you get too much moisture in here, you can stop the aging process from occurring. And if that happens and you end up with too much moisture in your cheese, not enough of a ratio of moisture to oxygen dissipation and reintegration into your cheese, you'll end up with what's called a paste. And the cheese will just turn into a paste. I don't even know how to describe it to you. But basically, think of like, kind of like I can't even describe what it is. It's not a cheese, and it's not curd. It's somewhere in the middle. And what will happen is when you cut that cheese, you won't have a slice. It will just crumble into a wet pile, and it won't go any further than that. So from an aging standpoint, this would be probably the second least favorite way of mine, next to the bag of aging a cheese. But only because of those particular issues, the costs involved, the maintenance involved. If something goes wrong inside the cheese, you gotta tear the whole thing apart and redo it. And then having to monitor the cheese and see if possibly something's growing inside of it, because if you miss it or you're not paying attention to it, you might end up throwing the whole cheese in the garbage, and you don't want to do that. And my third and new favorite way is bandage. Okay, bandaging is great for a number of reasons. Number one, it provides a perfect barrier to keep the mold up here and not in the cheese. With a bandage wrap, what you do is, after you press the cheese and you remove the moisture from it, you take lard or tallow or butter, whatever it may be, and then you take strips of cheesecloth and you basically wrap each side with 2 long or 3 long pieces. I usually use 3. And then you cut 3 circular pieces for each side. So say 6 pieces with about an inch overhang or so. And you basically dip each a side, then a top, then a side, then a top, then a side, then a top, and you apply it. And I have a video online about this. But the great thing about this is it allows the moisture to dissipate. And as it dissipates and there's that transfer of oxygen needed for the aging in the cheese, it also allows for any of that moisture to kind of settle on top of the cheese, the skin of the cheese, and for it to mold. And, again, a lot of people don't like the mold thing, but you have to think of mold as it's almost like a wax, right? So what it does is it grows on the top of the cheese and it creates this perfect environment where it protects the inside of the cheese, but it also feeds on the whey dissipation coming from the inside of the cheese. And as it's feeding, it's leaving behind its crust on your cheese, which creates the perfect permeable atmosphere for the cheese to age. And in fact, it creates, next to a natural rind, it creates one of the best, actually, in my opinion, I think now, a molded rind or bandaged cheese, in my opinion, it's just the best way to go. But this comes kind of at a cost too. This cheese is well knitted. There's no cracks or defects in it. If you do have a cheese that doesn't knit, however, you're going to have those open fissures inside the top of the cheese, and that's fine. The only issue with that is as long as they're not too deep. I mean, if they're only just below the surface, you know, and they don't reach into the cheese, you're fine. The only issue with that is you know, you get the mold grows on top, but it wants to get in those fissures, so it will grow as far as it can. So if your crack is, you know, 1/8 of an inch into the cheese, you're going to have all that mold going down in there into your cheese until it runs out of space to grow. You know, if you don't mind eating the mold after you've finished the cheese and you cleaned it off, because that's what I do with these. I take the bandage wrap off, I take a brine solution, and I basically rub the whole cheese off, and that kills any surface mold that's on the cheese, and I allow it to dry, and then I pack it and I eat it. The issue with that is, you know, if you're going to give these to your friends, you know, and you're not a cheesemaker, you're not afraid to eat the bits of mold that are in the cracks, because I rather enjoy them. Giving these to somebody that doesn't know much about cheese, they likely may take it and throw it right in garbage, because they'll think there's something wrong with it, that it's spoiled, that it's rotten, it can't be eaten, whatever it is. So if you find yourself in a place where you're going to be making cheese and giving it to people, you're going to end up finding that you're going to end up cutting off 1/4 inch of the entire cheese just to make the cheese look good to give to somebody else. And, you know, you can do that, but, you know, in my opinion, it's why not spend the extra day or two trying to press your cheese and make sure that you don't have to deal with that at the end. I mean, that's a whole nother video in and of itself. But I just kind of want to outline the differences and the reasons behind why you don't want to use a vac bag. You know, as I said, because of the moisture retention, possibility of mold growth, prevention of your cheese from even aging. And then, back to the vac bag, unless you take that bag off every couple weeks and re-vac it, that dank moisture, flavor, smell will then permeate itself and inject itself into your cheese. And I'm telling you, you're really losing any type of ability to enjoy your cheese if you vac seal it. It is easy, but it does nothing for your cheese. It actually regresses your cheese. So, in my opinion, if you want to move forward with the best tasting cheese, okay, you want to natural rind 1, bandage 2, wax 3, vac seal 4. Unless you're using production stable, food grade, permeable vacuum seal bags, then you can go ahead and move forward with that. But you know, that's all I have on this, and I'm sure you guys will have some other videos for later on, but that's all we have on the aging piece. So I gotta go now because I gotta debag this and have myself a little 5 o'clock somewhere. See you guys.